I wanted to talk a little bit about debt capacity. In particular, I want to talk about cash flow variability and debt capacity. So here we have cash flows over time. They're cyclical, and we have the average cash flow at some level. So what this does is helps determine the debt capacity, and it doesn't always have to be at the very lowest level of cash flows over time, but this gives us sort of a way to anchor it a little bit. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a minute. Now, if cash flows become more variable, or we have similar firms, but they differ in the variability of the cash flows, and debt capacity goes down. Now, what about if the debt level exceeds debt capacity? Well, then we have this situation where we have debt capacity of that level, but then we have debt level considerably higher. And we can have the possible outcome of cash shortages where the company doesn't generate enough cash to service its debt. Now, a cash buffer can solve that problem, but if you're going to hold a lot of idle cash in order to borrow more, it might be better just to have a lower level of cash and use that, what would have been excess idle cash, to do whatever you're going to do with the debt proceeds. This is sort of a trade-off in terms of the cost of debt, the amount of return on idle cash, and the tolerance of managers to risk. Now, the other thing that we can look at here is, again, we have the variable cash flows over time and an average cash flow of some level. But suppose that this debt capacity is going to be compared to a company that has the same variability of cash flows, but a higher average cash flow. So now we're up a little bit higher. That means debt capacity has increased. So if a company has higher average cash flows or less variable cash flows, they're going to have more debt capacity than in the other situations. So here's a couple takeaways. First of all, debt capacity is a valuable resource, or debt is a valuable resource, because it shields taxes, or the company from taxes, since interest expense is deductible. We know that the determinants of debt capacity are going to be the variability and the level of cash flows. And one thing I didn't go into in any detail, but will for just a moment here, is what causes variability of cash flows. Well, that depends on the markets or the type of products that a company sells. If a company sells necessities, it's a grocery, then variability of cash flows aren't going to be huge. But if a company sells durable goods, goods that can be repaired so that the purchase is postponable, it can be delayed, so appliances, cars, homes, that sort of thing, they're going to have cyclical cash flows, because as interest rates or income change, people are going to postpone purchases. They can have the appliance, the car, the home repaired or maintained, and so we're going to get cyclicality in cash flows. Luxury goods, similarly, those are often income dependent, and although there's a core group of people that are very wealthy that can consume all the time, on the margin we're going to have people that can only buy those luxury goods when their incomes are high, and so we would expect certain types of goods, maybe art, very expensive products of all types, cars, watches, clothes, and so on, to be somewhat cyclical. So variability of cash flow is going to depend on the products and markets that a company participates in, and then that will in turn determine debt capacity. And we want to make use of debt capacity because it does have the ability to increase the value of the firm.